Hey guys, I'm back with another video blog, and this time instead of talking about more health related things like amenorrhea or intuitive eating or all those things we usually chat about here, I've actually gotten a lot of emails and questions from readers, just a lot about life stuff, balancing being a student and studying and full-time work, and what does that look like to go back to school to be a nurse practitioner versus a physician's assistant versus an MD. So I'm going to be providing several links below this post and also some resources that I mentioned here. But to kind of get things started, I've gotten a lot of emails about how do you balance schoolwork, running a business, self-care, yada, 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 extracurriculars, and actually still being social and not totally insane. And I want to be able to answer that question, but I want to first begin by answering that question with a big, huge umbrella answer of I don't. You never balance it all. I really don't even know what that means, balancing it all, because I feel like life is an ebb and flow and you learn and you grow and there's crazy seasons and there's more restful seasons, but you're never going to do it all perfectly. And so I preface this entire conversation with that of I try to portray real life on the blog or Instagram or social media, but obviously there's always a lot going on. But I always want to make it very clear that I don't do it all. And if it looks like I am, then I'm messing a whole lot of stuff up. Meaning I'm not doing everything perfectly. I've got too much on my plate and I've totally overshot what I could handle at one time. So a few things though, is first things first is that I don't. Second of all, the biggest thing I learned while being a full-time student, running Nutshell, so running a side business. At one point, I was also working a part-time nursing job and also trying to take care of myself. And the first year I was in nursing school, I actually was single. And I didn't even do a ton of dating. I didn't even have time to date. And then about 9 months into my program, I met Nick. So for most of this time, I've actually been in a serious committed relationship, which, as probably most people know who are, that is a lot of time commitment. Good time, of course, but time nonetheless. So one of the first things that I can say is that I stopped being a perfectionist. From my undergrad year at Columbia doing my bachelor's to my master's year, my grade point average was not the same. It was still good. I don't want to say that I totally let my grades go to the wayside, but I stopped being a point monger and striving for like a 4.0. And just being okay with letting that not be my goal in life. And so I'll totally admit to school being a total idol and wanting perfect grades and really being hard on myself if I didn't. But I started to realize that wasn't the point of being a good clinician, getting straight A's, and that getting straight A's didn't make me a better clinician. If anything, it probably made me a worse clinician. Because I wasn't focused on actual patient care. I was so focused on my stupid grades. I shouldn't say stupid, but it was a hyper focus. Too much of a good thing is not a good thing. So I stopped being a perfectionist. That went from school, that went from being okay with being really messy with like having my apartment clean, with meal prepping, that went with having things be really gray in terms of workouts. Like if I had a workout planned or I had this I'll go to yoga this day and then I'll go run this day. If life got crazy, then that just didn't happen, and that was okay. And so I became okay with not getting everything done. And I think that's a huge piece. If you're balancing lots of major roles, you have to be okay with not doing everything perfectly, and that's okay. So that was a huge piece. I also decided that I was going to do what mattered. And so for me, if it was a short like writing assignment or even a case study that we were going to discuss in class, I didn't sweat over making that case study perfect. I didn't sweat over having the perfect differential diagnosis and the perfect plan of care and writing the perfect HPI. I didn't stress over that because I knew I'd be talking through it in class. That wasn't worth my time. I did it well enough to complete it, but I wasn't going to spend a lot of time on it. And then other things that I needed to spend a lot of time on, like this huge, what we called a terminal project, which was this huge research project that we did for the year that we ended up submitting for publication to journals, that I spent a lot more time on. Studying for exams, I spent a lot more time on. But the things that actually don't matter, like that little writing assignment or posting on that form or whatever, just let those things go. They don't matter. And so that came from schoolwork to also like blogging. Seeing Nutshell clients was my priority. Getting consistent blog posts up was not my priority. friendships. You know, I had like a select maybe 3 to 5 group of girlfriends that I really wanted to put a lot of my time and investment into. And so those are the friendships that I focused on. And the other ones came, I knew people would be forgiving. If I disappointed people, I knew that wasn't a bad thing to disappoint people. You're going to disappoint people when you can't be everywhere all the time. And so I had some friendships that I set boundaries around, that those are the ones that I would invest in, and those sorts of things. So I don't do it all. I stopped being a perfectionist. I decided to do what mattered and not do what didn't matter. And fourth, in terms of a very practical thing that got me through and helped me balance some of it, is that I started using a bullet journal. I did a Google Calendar to code things. I would write things in a regular planner. Nothing was really working for me. And so what I did was I actually started a bullet journal. There's a link below this video, and there's also a link to the bullet journal that I use to so there's a link for the journal and there's a link to explain what a bullet journal is. I found this to be so awesome. I love pen to paper. I could make it whatever I wanted to. If I needed, in the midst of planning my week, if I needed to write down like things to buy at the grocery store, I could write that in the bullet journal. Everything goes in my bullet journal. I still use it all the time. It helps me organize my life. I'm not a type A. I don't work well with structure. So I needed something that could be dynamic and kind of move as my life moved. And so the bullet journal was awesome for me. And that kind of ties in with what I think helps when you're balancing a lot of things, is get it out of your head and onto paper. Anything that needed to be done went in the bullet journal. Any appointments I had went in the bullet journal. And then it was also a way for me to like write down gratitude. So every day when life was really overwhelming, when the subway freaking pissed me off because it was so slow and it took an hour and 45 minutes to get home from work, I would just make sure I was always writing like, what am I grateful for today? And so that kind of helped me in the midst of that, just stay really grateful. In terms of self-care, I think that is 100% the most important thing you can do during any busy life season. Even whether you just had a newborn baby as a mom, or you're a full-time medical student working part-time and maybe you have 3 kids too. Whatever your life looks like, I think making sure you're taking time for self-care is 100% important. And secondly is making sure sleep trumps all things. If you're not sleeping, I don't really care how you're working out. Because if you're not sleeping, that is the first thing. I even think sleeping before you're eating, all the kale in the world and planning out your meals. If you're not sleeping, everything else goes to the wayside. From not even a physical perspective, right, where you start producing high levels of cortisol, and that can wreak havoc on your body. That's like a whole nother conversation. But sleep is going to affect your cognitive function. It's going to affect your appetite. It's going to affect your mood. It's going to affect everything. And so sleep is like the number one thing. Not saying I did it perfectly. I actually had a lot of anxiety when I first moved to New York. And so I had to work a lot through that. But trying to get at least 7 hours of sleep and really making that the number one priority. Workouts get skipped. Things don't get done. I've definitely canceled nutshell appointments before. I've had a night of insomnia, or for some reason I didn't get to bed till like midnight or 1 a.m. and I really had a 7 a.m. client. I just be super honest. Hey, I'm having a really bad night of sleep. I'm gonna need to reschedule. I really hope you can understand, but I want to make sure that I'm 100% there cognitively when I talk to my clients. So sleep is so important. Self-care is so important, and that might look different depending on A, what your needs are, and B, what kind of life season you're in. Self-care for me sometimes meant literally standing with my eyes closed and taking 5 deep breaths, because that was it. Other times it meant going to yoga. Something that I do even now weekly is getting a manicure. Not necessarily to have my nails painted. One, I love when they clean your cuticles and cut all that stuff off. That's like my favorite part. But really, because it causes me to sit there and do nothing. Like, you're sitting there doing my hands. I can't read. I can't use my hands. Nothing. Sometimes I listen, to a podcast in one ear or whatnot. But sometimes just chat with the lady, and it literally causes me really to slow down. And so whatever that self-care looks like for you, a hot bubble bath, whatever that might mean, a long walk, with no earbuds or anything like that. I think implementing some element of self-care into every day is so important. And like I said, if the day is totally nuts, then I think even deep breathing, laying on your bed and literally taking 5 deep breaths at the end or beginning or middle of the day can be a form of self-care. So I hope that kind of helped answer some of that question. Sleep always trumps all, some form of self-care every day. And I think lastly, also really making sure you're setting aside time for relationships. There's plenty of social things I've had to say no to, 100%. I'm not saying go out on a Saturday night if you have an exam on a Monday. But if you're studying all day and a girlfriend calls you and says, hey, I'd love to like grab lunch, I'd love to go on a walk, take the 45-minute walk, take the hour lunch break, because your mind needs rest. Your mind needs other things it's doing other than studying or working or being productive 24/7. And whether that means you know, veg out to some Netflix for 45 minutes, or whether it means you do, you know, get on that phone call with the girlfriend or hang out with a friend for a little bit, give yourself a break. You need that stuff, because then you go back and you feel refreshed and recharged and ready to study. So I hope that answers that question. The second part that I'm going to answer to this is what made me go back to school and become an NP versus an MD or PA. I've linked to some blog posts below this and also some YouTube videos that I've done with Andrea Tooley, who's actually a resident, an ophthalmology resident at the Mayo Clinic. She's amazing. She has tons of videos on YouTube just about studying and everything else. But the biggest thing for me is that I felt very limited in my dietetic practice. Going back to school to be a nurse practitioner is something I have not regretted for one second. Without a doubt, have not regretted it for one second. So I felt very limited in my dietetic practice. I wanted to provide comprehensive care, care far beyond food. And I wanted to be able to holistically care for women. And so as a nurse practitioner in the state of New York, we're actually super autonomous.